in this race as he was making the pitch, making the closing argument as to why people in New Hampshire should come out, turn out, and vote for his dad. We've talked about the politics in this show already. We're going to talk about the politics again coming up in just a little bit. But what about the process? What does this actually look like? How does it work? Well, we've got you covered in the breakdown. Check it out. For New Hampshire, a proud presidential primary tradition. First in the nation. First in the nation. First in the nation. First in the nation. The state's voted first for more than a century now. So committed, they literally made it law that their primary be at least 7 days before anyone else's. It's a different animal than Iowa with its caucus system. New Hampshire is more like the voting you're used to, with polls opening early and voters lining up all day. It's a preview of what November will look like. The state has 22 delegates up for grabs out of a possible 2,400 across the country. Other states have a lot more. So why is New Hampshire such a big deal for the candidates?
New Hampshire historically has been that state that introduces candidates to the rest of the nation. New Hampshire voters will say, hey, look at this person. Take a look and see for yourself.
Experts point out it's all about momentum. A win here can propel a candidate in states to come, like the ones that vote on Super Tuesday. Just look at the historical record. Of the 4 Republicans who've won the presidency in the last 50 years, 3 won New Hampshire. One of them, Donald Trump, who lost Iowa in 2016, but won here in this state, catapulting him to the eventual nomination. Polls now show him ahead of his nearest rival, Nikki Haley, by double digits in most cases, but it appears to be his weakest early state. Haley, hoping she can use that to her advantage in a state she's invested her time and money in. She's logged nearly 3 times as many days visiting New Hampshire as Mr. Trump. Unlike Iowa, New Hampshire has fewer evangelicals, more moderates, more suburban and young voters.
On paper, Nikki Haley should be very appealing to those particular voters. But if she's not, like if in bedroom suburban communities with lots of commuters, here in the 7th tier of New Hampshire, if Trump is winning those towns, it's going to be a very big night for him.
And then there are the independents, also called undeclared voters, who outnumber both Democrats and Republicans here. They're allowed to vote in either the Democratic or Republican primary, and at the moment, polling shows they favor Haley over Mr. Trump. So, Aaron, that is a little bit of an explanation as to what will happen, not tonight, of course, but tomorrow night when I will see you, probably live from a polling location. The polls will be open all day tomorrow in and around, obviously in New Hampshire. They actually even open up starting at midnight tonight. One tiny little town called Dixville Notch that goes right at the stroke of midnight. So we'll have a handful of vote in, and I do mean a literal handful at that point. As for the Democrats, if you're wondering, again, we're out covering the Republicans because that is where the competitive primary race is right now. As for Democrats, keep in mind that because the Democratic National Committee and the Democrats moved around which states vote early, which states vote first, New Hampshire was not in that mix, so delegates essentially don't get named to the National Convention over the summer. That said, you are seeing still a write-in campaign for President Biden. You've seen Keith Phillips, for example, Mary Williams out here as well. So lots to cover here in what they call the Granite State, Aaron, where we will be, of course, all night. Aaron, back to you.
Howard Jackson, thank you. The Biden administration today announcing new steps to help Americans get contraceptive and abortion access under emergency care law, including expanded coverage of FDA-approved contraceptives at no cost under the Affordable Care Act for millions of women nationwide and access to emergency abortion. It comes on the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade, with the administration sharpening its message on abortion ahead of the election. And Vice President Harris in Wisconsin today launching a national tour focused on protecting access to reproductive care. The Biden campaign says it will put reproductive freedom front and center over the next 10 months, tying abortion bans to former President Trump's ownership of the fall of Roe. Denise Alcindor is joining us now.
Vice President Harris came to deep red Waukesha County, Wisconsin, and talked about the need to push for abortion access. Take a listen.
In the last 19 months, in states across our nation, extremists have proposed and passed laws that criminalize doctors and punish women. Laws that threaten doctors and nurses with prison time, even for life, simply for providing health care.
The vice president also said that Democrats need to continue to build on the momentum and push for abortion access. She said that this is really a healthcare crisis for women, that their lives are in danger. She also went after former President Trump, saying that he had really created this, what she called a dangerous situation. I also want to tell you that I talked to a woman who had an abortion in 2017. She said she felt forced into that decision because her baby had a fatal defect, and she really, in some ways, is still grieving that loss. Take a listen to what she told me.
I'd like lawmakers to know that every situation is nuanced, and you cannot, this is not a black and white situation or a black and white issue. You can't make just sweeping laws.
Now, she is now a mother of two and said that if she hadn't been able to have that abortion, she wouldn't have been able to have her second child. Aaron?
Denise Elson-Dora, thank you for that reporting. NBC covers hundreds of stories each day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or read them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their region, in a segment we like to call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, 3 crew members are dead after their medical helicopter crashed in Oklahoma. They were returning to base after transporting a patient when it happened, according to officials. No one is dead on what caused the crash, but the NTSB is investigating. And out of our Northeast Bureau, officials say a man was arrested at JFK Airport for allegedly smuggling 40 pounds of cocaine inside frozen shrimp. Officers discovered the shrimp during a security check and immediately knew something was fishy when they found dozens of bags full of white powder. The suspect says he's been paid a few $1,000s to bring the drugs from Guyana to the United States. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison. And out of our Western Bureau, police in California arrested a woman for allegedly stealing 65 of those viral Stanley cups worth almost $2,500. Officers found the suspect after a store reported she walked out with a shopping cart full of the tumblers without paying for them. The woman was arrested for grand theft. And coming up, election deja vu in one Connecticut city tomorrow, while people are voting in a mayoral race for the 3rd time in 4 months.
News lives in the now. Look at this. You can't even see anything anymore.
Let's break down what we know.
You gotta see this. News for the generation of now is in this News Now.
Were you calling the shots for Mr. President ultimately? Was the Biden administration caught off guard by this latest surge of migrants? Is it clear who's going to govern Gaza once this war is over? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
A voting scandal in one New England city getting nationwide attention tonight. We're talking about the race for mayor in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a city of like 150,000 people. Take a look at this video, allegedly showing people stuffing ballot drop boxes ahead of the Democratic primary back in September. A judge decided there was enough evidence to order a do-over of this race even after the general election in November. The man who won that race has been mayor on and off for decades and has a controversial history in the city. Joe Gannon served 5 terms as mayor before being convicted of corruption charges. He went to federal prison for 7 years and has been elected twice more since being released. The primary for what could be his 8th term is tomorrow. This contest got the attention of former President Donald Trump, who of course falsely claimed there was widespread election fraud of which there is no evidence. He posted that it's a tiny part of what's happening in our country. Now, Jane Tim joins me now. Jane, I have so many questions. Election fraud is rare and not like a widespread issue. What are the candidates saying about all of this?
You know, for every rule, there is an exception, and Bridgeport, Connecticut appears to maybe be that exception, where you are seeing evidence of sort of significant fraud that was enough that a judge said that we have to redo a primary election. And if the primary is redone and the outcome changes, you'll actually have to redo a general election after that. Now, the candidate, Joe Gannon, has also accused his rival of fraud. There's a lot of hay going back and forth. But what we understand from court testimony and interviews with reporters is that there are people that went in and out of low-income housing, encouraged people to apply for absentee ballots, and then helped them return it. Connecticut has very strict rules on who can help somebody vote absentee by mail. And that's where, while these may not be illegal, the ballots may have been cast in violation of the law. So that's why we ended up with this redo. Voter fraud allegations have dogged Bridgeport, Connecticut for years. So this is something voters, I think, are pretty fed up with. Let's take a listen to something that our candidate colleagues at Conversations with Voters.
I think it's a necessity, and, you know, we need to find out who the real winner is in Bridgeport.
I think things need to be changed because the city's out of character right now.
Now, we'll find out tomorrow whether or not this race, which is decided by hundreds of votes, hundreds of absentee ballots, will be decided in the same way, or if we go to a general election review after this primary election review.
And let's talk potential penalties. Are there any for anyone involved in the alleged ballot stuffing?
You know, this is a state, or currently is a state investigation going on, and once the results of that are had, it can be referred to the Attorney General's office. There's a 2019 primary with this same Mayor Gannon that has been referred to the Attorney General's office. That investigation is still ongoing. State officials say that this investigation will go quicker. I think there is an enormous amount of pressure on them to get to the bottom of this, but election redos are an incredibly extraordinary recourse. I will say that election experts point to the fact that this was caught, that, you know what I mean, this kind of fraud, while it does happen in occasional instances, it gets caught because it's too obvious to be missed.
And what are election experts saying about this race and other recent elections that have been redone?
You know, election redos are something I'm watching because it is so extraordinary, Aaron. But you've seen a handful of them in the recent months, and usually it's in the kind of race, like a local race, where the decision to kind of vote is maybe 2 or 3 people have voted. But as more elections are litigated, more people go to court, more people try fraud, whether it is baseless or founded, you're going to see more calls for this. And whether or not the courts decide that they are merited is really going to help, is going to decide a lot of things based on how people trust our elections and whether or not we have to do this again.
Jane, thank you. Well, still to come, some top car companies are passing on Super Bowl ads for the first time in decades. We'll tell you why next.
This book will actually understand why people had to jump in the ocean. News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
The Detroit Lions headed to the NFC Championship this weekend, putting the team just one win away from what would be a historic Super Bowl appearance. The Motor City having its moment right now after beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last night and getting that much closer to what could be the team's first ever Super Bowl. But in that moment, Detroit automakers struggling. Ford, GM, and Stellantis all saying they're skipping running ads during the big game this year. Christine Romans has more on